And once again, welcome to Our Time. In this episode, we're posing the question, what's the difference between a will and an estate? And fortunately, we have a financial planner here, John Grocke, who's going to answer that question. And I have a great pleasure in talking to Lisa Lonero, who is a contemporary dancer, she's a choreographer, and she's also a Pilates instructor. And she's got some interesting stuff to tell us about being a dancer, and also the fact that she came from South Africa and has made quite a career here in Australia. But first, let's find out the difference between the will and the estate, and who better to lead that discussion than the lovely Janice.
I'd like to welcome back to the program John Grocke. He's been on our program a few times before. Thank you for coming in again.
Pleasure.
Now, we're talking about estate planning today, which should be of an interest to everyone, not something that you think, oh, I can do that a bit later, something to do when I write my will, although we should have that done already too, shouldn't we?
Yes, I agree.
So
yes.
Estate planning is something very important for everyone.
It's one of those things that people like to leave in the bottom drawer and maybe think about when they're old or perhaps when they're travelling overseas, but it's actually something that's very important. It may have been, Janice, in days gone by that Grandad would whisper something in someone's ear on his deathbed, but there are very important planning implications in actually having a conversation as a family about some of the things that might be involved.
So it really is something it doesn't matter how old you are, it is something that you need to sit down with the family and discuss. And also, I mean, with a financial advisor, but really you would advise to go on and see someone else about this.
As a financial planner, we would probably just be the catalyst and encourage people to then visit with a solicitor or their solicitor and actually formulate how some of these things might be documented.
So really, I mean, what you're saying, because we're married, a couple, there's, you know, you have things that are tied up together. And sometimes you don't, but it's not always that the partner that can take control of it, because there are so many loopholes and things that have to be ticked off, that it's not an automatic thing, is it?
Janice, that's a very important point, because the individual's rights now are very much enshrined in legislation, and just because one is married doesn't mean to say one partner can make a life-threatening decision, for example, for the other partner, and therefore appropriate authorities need to be set up in a formal sense so that if the partner and the family want to help make those decisions at a time of an extreme event, that they have the ability to do so.
But it really shouldn't happen when there is an extreme event. Personally, I should say, my husband had an accident and he's all right now, thank goodness. But you don't think it's something that is just around the corner. And when it happens, you think, oh my goodness, what if? So you really do have to have these things in place. It's not something that you can be flippant about. It really is a very important thing to do, because you just don't know what's around the corner.
Could I relate just a little story about a very good friend of mine who I played sport with for some years, and I had mentioned to him various powers of attorney and maybe a bit of estate planning, visiting his solicitor.
Because if you had young family or children?
Early teenage children, by the time the 8 years or so had passed since I'd seen him, and when I next saw him I found that his wife was actually in a disability centre, couldn't speak and was in a wheelchair, and that was a result of an operation that was unexpected, and a blood clot, and she now is under the care of the guardianship board because they didn't have appropriate authorities in place, and he needs to deal with them and establish budgets for her and actually substantiate expenses that he's spending for her on behalf of her daily and weekly routine.
So, if he'd have listened to you before and taken your advice and had this plan in advance, he would have been covered for any of those things.
The family could have made all of those decisions in-house, and there wouldn't have been the bureaucracy, and the guardianship board have a very important part or role to play, but bureaucracy can tend to be a bit overwhelming. I think many people would prefer to keep that in family and have the family help and make those decisions. And Bob's always been good enough to say share that story with people, because for me it really is evidence of why I should have.
Oh, absolutely. So what we're trying to tell you today, what are we trying to tell everybody today? Just to do something now, because you just don't know what's going to happen. You might have thought that you've covered everything with your will, your insurance and everything like that, but it is something else that you really need to think about.
If I can just suggest a couple of pointers, there are various powers of attorney, one that would cover medical or health and wellbeing, another one that would cover financial affairs. There's a will, of course, and there's even, if we talk about people that are older, the opportunity to establish a trust through their will, let's call it a will trust, and make sure that what they have in an estate will pass to either their children or their grandchildren, and in some cases in a very tax efficient way. So there are some really nice opportunities to do things in a very efficient manner if there's a conversation and planning done in advance.
So what we need to do from here, John, I mean, what is the suggestion then? We're just, if you have got a will set in place and you think you've done everything right, but you haven't done this yet, what's the phone call we need to make?
I think the phone call should either be to your financial planner. Maybe you're an accountant if you don't deal with your financial planner. But certainly if you have a solicitor, talk to your solicitor about the array of things that you need to do to make sure your affairs are in an orderly fashion if you lose capacity.
In case of an emergency. Correct. And you just never know. I mean, look at us and your friend. I mean, you just don't know what's around the corner. I think, you know, we become complacent a little bit too, don't we? I mean, you sort of think, oh no, I don't need to worry about that. I'm not old enough yet.
I think it is the case, and I think people sometimes are hesitant because talking about matters of estate, people think brings on.
It is almost like, oh, I must be getting old now if I'm talking about this stuff. I mean, it is. You just don't want to talk about it. You just keep putting it off and off.
That's right. That's right. And I think people, just with a bit of encouragement, can get some really good advice and probably make sure that things are planned in a way that they would want, rather than the way the state would want or bureaucratic systems dictate.
And I think also, you know, it really is for your own peace of mind, but also for your family, to make sure that they don't have any concerns. I mean, as you said, it really can fall back onto them, and then they have, like your friend, you know, it's all this bureaucratic stuff that you have to go through. So, you know, I mean, it's really good advice, and I'm, you know, it is something that I must admit I haven't thought about, but I'm going home to talk about how to discuss, you know. Well, I don't know, we don't have any estate planning, I'm sure, as much as we have a will in place, but, you know, and you have insurance, you have your life insurance, but...
Janice, could I add, one of the things that people often will do, because it's economical, is go to the post office and get a format or a template to do a will. And that's a simple way to do a will, but one of the things that doesn't discover is the questions that arise from the broader estate planning issues, which can only be raised by someone such as a solicitor or a financial planner. So just doing a will doesn't necessarily cover all of the essential things you need to consider.
No. And we think it does at times. You just take it for granted that, well, I've done that, don't have to worry anymore.
That's right.
But obviously there is a lot more. If you have any questions, I think you can obviously find us on Facebook and we can point you in the right direction. But John, what would you suggest then from here? What can we say to everyone?
I think, look, if people had a direct question to the program, I'm happy for you to pass that on and we could help. Or they should speak to their solicitor and make sure that they ask what planning is required to get the best outcome. Okay,
fantastic. Thank you for coming in again.
Thank you,
Always good to talk to you. Thanks for that great advice.
Thank you.